Israel's defense forces have just issued a statement. A short while ago, the IDF has identified missiles launched from Iran towards the territory of Israel. Defensive systems, they say, are operating to intercept the threat. Upon receiving the alert, the public has been instructed to enter a protected space and remain there until further notice. Leaving the protected space is only permitted following an explicit directive. Continue to follow the instruction of the Home Front Command, says Israel. Reports say Iran, meanwhile, has held direct talks with the US amidst the intensifying conflict within Israel. So that's another big piece of news. This, of course, not official yet, but reports that Iran has held direct talks with the United States. Now, amidst this escalation tensions, therefore, between Iran and Israel, US President Donald Trump is going to be key. He has already said something big is going to happen in the next week. The question is, will he strike Iran or will he stay away? Take a look at Trump's options.
As the Israel-Iran conflict spirals, US President Donald Trump has made a series of explosive remarks, signaling support for direct military action and even regime change in Tehran. As explosions lit up Iran's capital, Donald Trump delivered a chilling message. Nobody knows what I'll do. Next week will be big. The US president has openly declared that he doesn't want a ceasefire, he wants total victory.
We're not looking for a ceasefire. We're looking for a total, complete victory. Again, you know what the victory is. No nuclear weapon.
Trump claims Iran has already reached out for talks, but dismissed the effort, calling Tehran totally defenseless and saying it's too late to negotiate. US media reports now suggest Trump has approved plans for an attack on Iran, though he's yet to give the final order. He's also reiterated a hardline stance on Iran never having nuclear weapons.
I think they wish they signed it now. It was a fair deal. And now it's a harder thing to sign, you know. It's a lot of water over the dam. But, you know, it's very, I say it very simply, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Too much devastation.
Amid these rising tensions, the US military has ramped up its presence in West Asia, deploying stealth bombers and fighter jets. The Doomsday plane and airborne nuclear command center also landed at Joint Base Andrews in Washington, D.C. Trump's call for regime change has sparked outrage in Tehran, with Iran's supreme leader branding Trump's words cowardly threats and vowing punitive retaliation against Israel.
The Americans, those who are familiar with the politics of this region, know that America's intervention in this matter is 100% to their detriment. What they will suffer in this regard is much greater than what Iran may suffer. The damage America will suffer if it makes a military intervention in this field will undoubtedly be irreparable.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has publicly backed Khamenei's regime, saying he doesn't even want to discuss the idea of an assassination.
With your permission, I hope this will be the most correct answer to your question. I do not wish even to discuss such a possibility.
Trump hit back, saying Putin should mind his business and focus on war with Ukraine.
It's another one, you know, Russia, Ukraine is so stupid. Would have never happened if I was president. You guys agree with that, right? Would have never happened if I was president. Putin would have never done it. And I spoke to him yesterday and I said, you know, he actually offered to help mediate. I said, do me a favor. Mediate your own. Let's mediate Russia first, okay?
Trump's rhetoric has added fuel to a crisis that now risks spiraling into a wider war, dragging in the world's most powerful superpower. Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me now, another special guest, Michael Rubin, joins me from Washington, D.C., former Pentagon official and senior fellow, American Enterprise Institute. He's worked extensively on the Middle East. I appreciate you joining us, Mr. Rubin. What are you making of this conflict as it now enters its second week? Is it inevitable that sooner or later the United States will join this conflict?
Well, at the very least, the United States is providing aerial refueling to the Israelis, it appears, because the Israelis need to fuel both going into Iran and returning from Iran. Remember, while Israel had struck at Iraq before, Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. Then on everyone's mind is whether the United States will use its B-2 bombers to attack the underground nuclear facility at Fordo. While the debate in Washington that the United States shouldn't get involved and do that, the reality is that if the war ends and Fordo still remains in place, Iran will reconstitute its nuclear program quickly, simply because even if they don't do it themselves, China, Russia, maybe even Turkey and Pakistan will help them do so.
So do you think, Michael Rubin, that pressure is gradually building on Trump to just dive in? Or is opinion still divided, particularly based on past experiences of United States intervening in conflicts of this nature in West Asia and Middle East in particular?
Well, no one is talking about putting American forces on the ground. So yes, American debate is polarized, but it's always polarized before the United States goes into conflict. The issue then becomes whether President Donald Trump is going to use his role as president to make a decision. I very much suspect he will.
But here is a president, Michael Rubin, who came into office in January this year promising to end all wars. He claimed he was the peacemaker. And what are we seeing instead? The world is on the precipice of another war, and Trump could well lead the United States into another conflict. So how are we to read Donald Trump's claim to be a peacemaker, and yet being unable to stop wars, and his flip-flops?
Well, yes. First of all, historically, every U.S. president since George H.W. Bush in the 1990s had his, or in the 1980s and early 1990s, had his foreign policy legacy defined by the crisis, which no one saw coming during the campaign. So for George H.W. Bush, it was Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. For Bill Clinton, it was the wars in the Balkans. For George W. Bush, it was 9/11, Afghanistan and Iraq, and so forth. The point is, no president gets held to the promises or the intent which he made during his campaign, because the realities of the world intercede. President Donald Trump is going to need to make a decision. Look, the timeline wasn't Donald Trump's. We now know that, of course, in April 2024 and October 2024, Iran and Israel exchanged missile attacks. We know that Israel at the time attacked Iran's early warning systems and its anti-aircraft systems as well. Iran was rebuilding those capabilities. That's why Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu wanted to attack now, because the window of opportunity was rapidly closing. That's not on Donald Trump. That's on Bibi Netanyahu. But once we start, Donald Trump talks about protecting American interests. He needs to ask whether showing displeasure towards Israel is a greater U.S. interest than allowing Iran to reconstitute its nuclear program. I don't think that's a question that the president is going to choose wrong on.
But Michael Rubin, is this any more about Iran's nuclear plan? Or with every passing day, is this becoming about so-called regime change, about toppling the government in Iran? Bibi Netanyahu is saying it far more openly now than he did on day one. His defense minister has gone as far as calling Khamenei a modern-day Hitler who must not exist. Trump claims he knows where the supreme leader is. He can take him out, but won't take him out now. Is this still posturing to get Iran to the negotiating table? Or is Israel and America serious about effecting a regime change in Iran?
Yeah, look, first of all, in any coalition, if you want to call it that, different countries have different interests. Israel has gone beyond just trying to eradicate the nuclear program, and they are quite openly going for regime change. This is why, for example, the Israelis struck the National Police headquarters, and they struck the surveillance video farm, the computer center for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps surveillance operation. What they're trying to do is eliminate any sort of means of repression that the Iranians would use against Iran's own people, hoping that the Iranian people will rise up. That hasn't happened yet, but I suspect it will become a little bit more inevitable. At the same time, look, Donald Trump has said Iran needs to eliminate its nuclear program. Some people may say that's unrealistic, but remember Ayatollah Khomeini's speech from July 21st, 1988, in which he announced the end of the Iran-Iraq war, short of Iran achieving its goals. What Ayatollah Khomeini said at the time was, it's like drinking from a chalice of poison, but I have no choice but to drink from this cup if I want the Islamic Republic to survive. When Trump is talking about negotiations, he's essentially telling Khomeini that he must drink from a chalice of poison. The open question then is whether Khomeini can survive at this point if he gives up his nuclear program, because his own people may turn on him.
The reason I asked you that, Michael Rubin, is the United States has a history of triggering only further chaos whenever it tries to effect so-called regime changes. Look at what happened in Iraq, for instance, post Saddam Hussein. If tomorrow Khomeini or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are removed from positions of power, who knows who comes in their place? It could be even more dangerous.
Well, first of all, I would argue that Iraq today is a lot better than Iraq under Saddam Hussein. But putting that aside, the fact of the matter is, it is a big question. And this is where I'm frustrated with the United States, with India, with Europe, and with other countries. We can sit on the sidelines and wring our hands. But the question is, what are we doing to sort of skew the outcome to the most favorable scenario? Look, everyone would like for a peaceful, democratic Iran to exist. That's likely not going to be the outcome. The big problem is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The question then becomes, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, because they have the weaponry and they have the resources, going to establish a military dictatorship, perhaps like Egypt's military dictatorship, which is at peace with itself, at peace with its neighbors, generally doesn't kill minorities? Or are they going to be an ideological dictatorship? What can we do to prevent that worst possible outcome? Remember, war represents the failure of diplomacy, but war also creates diplomatic opportunities. We saw this after 1991 and the liberation of Kuwait, where we had the Madrid conference, where the Syrians, the Palestinians, and the Israelis sat together for the first time because of the defeat of Saddam Hussein in that war. What are we doing to suggest that if Ayatollah Khomeini falls, that we can have new diplomatic opportunities? Perhaps even the so-called Cyrus Accords, which would see the resumption of peace between Israel and Iran like they had before 1979.
I know this is speculative as to what lies ahead, but there are huge implications involved, huge stakes in this conflict spreading. What, according to you, therefore, Michael, is the most likely outcome? Do you see a prolonged, intensifying conflict now, or a short operation, particularly if the US enters with its B-2 bombs?
Well, look, I think this war is going to end in two ways. One, when Fordo is hit. That's the underground nuclear facility which no country with a peaceful energy program needs to have. The second issue is if Ayatollah Khomeini dies. The reason why no one wants to kill Khomeini is what you're saying now. They need him to actually surrender in favor of a new council to prevent a vacuum from being formed. The other issue that we need to recognize is when this war does end, if Iran forfeits its nuclear program, it's going to mean shipping out all of Iran's nuclear material. How is that going to happen, and who is going to do that? Is it going to be the Americans or the Israelis? Probably not. Could India have a role, given that India is trusted by both sides? Could India be the country that is charged with shipping out through Chabahar or Jask all of Iran's nuclear material? That's a question which I think New Delhi should be asking.
I'll get the Indian response in a moment, but in conclusion, Michael Rubin, put on your forecaster's hat, if I may say so, your pundit hat. Are we more likely or not in the next 48 hours to see that big decision being taken by Donald Trump, whether to go into Iran or not?
Look, I'm not a crystal ball. I'm a historian, so I get paid to predict the past. And my critics would say I only get that right about half the time. It's a foolish job to try to predict Donald Trump. But I do think with our forces in the region that we are going to see the United States involved with air power, but in no other mechanism. One of the other interesting issues, of course, is the latest satellite images from the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar show that there's absolutely no U.S. aircraft on the ground there. Where have they all gone? It shows that the United States is preparing preemptively to defend itself and its material and its men against retaliation. That itself suggests that perhaps the United States is going to do something.
Very interesting, Michael Rubin, and insightful as ever. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me there from Washington, D.C. Michael there spoke about the Indian connection and the role that India can play. Remember, there is an Indian connection because as the Israel-Iran war intensifies, Indian students stuck in the war-hit region, especially in Iran, are now scrambling for safety. India has launched Operation Sindhu to bring back their own. The first batch of about 100 students arrived earlier today. Take a look at this report.
Fear gripping the Middle East skies as missiles and drones fly. As the Israel-Iran war intensifies, civilians are left scrambling for safety. These also include Indian students stranded in the conflict zones. Hearing their plea for help, India acted swiftly, launching Operation Sindhu. The government announced a mission to evacuate students. The evacuation was a carefully coordinated effort involving travel across land borders from Israel and then airlifts from Iran. Earlier today, an Indigo flight landed at the Delhi airport carrying 110 Indian students from Iran's Urmia University. The Minister of State for External Affairs, Kirtivardhan Singh, was waiting for these students at the airport. He welcomed the students and reassured the nation.
We are evacuating some more people from Turkmenistan, and our missions have opened a 24-hour line for any request for evacuation. And as the situation evolves, we'll be sending more planes, more chartered flights to evacuate all Indian nationals from Iran.
For several parents, it was a moment of relief as their children returned home safely. Students upon arrival described the conditions in Iran. They also praised the role of Indian authorities in bringing them home, and also expressed a strong desire for peace, saying that they hope to return to their studies once the war ends.
आई एम सो थैंकफुल टू इंडियन गवर्नमेंट, जैसे हमें इवैक्यूएट किया गया बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से. जो भी एम्बेसडर हमारे साथ था, एक का नाम था पांडे सर, बहुत ही अच्छा, बहुत ही पोलाइट. मैं उनका बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ.
I'm really thankful for the Indian embassy. They evacuated us really quick. In 2-3 days we are in here, India. I'm very happy.
As tensions grip the Middle East, India says its evacuation efforts will continue. More flights are expected to bring back students in the coming days. For now, 110 families are reunited, and the students who were once worried and studied amid sirens are finally home. Bureau Report, India Today.
So what are India's options, if any, in this Israel-Iran conflict? What stand should and could India play? Javed Ashraf is former Indian ambassador, distinguished diplomat, joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Javed Ashraf. What are India's concerns, according to you, if this conflict gets more and more prolonged, as every indication now points towards?
Well, thank you, Rajdeep. It's rather late in the night. This is precisely the time when missiles start flying across between Iran and Israel. And I wanted to briefly comment on what Michael Rubin was saying. I think conflict has two phases, particularly if you've seen the Iraq-Iran war in 1980. I mean, there was a complete decimation of the Iranian institutions after the 1979 revolution, the Islamic Revolution. And when Iraq invaded Iran, they had captured 48,000 square kilometers in the first week. And Saddam Hussein spoke about the next Friday prayer being in Tehran. Iranians regrouped despite all the divisions, despite everything. And then you had this 8-year war, which was partly conventional, partly asymmetric. You saw that in 2003. On May 3, exactly a month and a half after the United States went into Iraq, President Bush stood on the aircraft carrier, declared victory. US was there till 2008. These things can get complicated. Here is a nation, I have to say, that thrives on the sense of martyrdom, drawing from the whole heritage of Shiite Islam. So I think this is going to be, they don't have the capacity compared to Israel, certainly, because they have the missiles, but they don't have air power. And US has already been saying that we have helped intercept missiles. They haven't taken the offensive position in this. They haven't taken, attacking position, but they have been helping Israel. And President Trump has spoken about we, in plural, have control over the Iranian airspace. So they're in some sense involved. Since 1967, Israel has never been in a war without the assurance of US support. You know that what happened in 56. I wanted to lay this before we go to, because this has implications that can go beyond simply the demolition of Fordo or the taking out of the entire nuclear program. You don't take out nuclear knowledge. And what we are going to see from India's standpoint, you're seeing we've got probably higher stakes of any place in the world is in this region. We've got, 10 million odd people working in the Gulf region, the biggest sources combined of remittances, 1/5 of the energy sources. It's a strategically 500 nautical miles from Chabahar, or 540. Oman is very close by. This region is absolutely our neighborhood. We are not seeing a war in the Gulf or in the Middle East. We are seeing a war in our neighborhood. And it has implications for us. Now, we have excellent relations with Israel. They've been supporting us on the counterterrorism. We've got excellent relations with Iran. But I don't think that we are really in a position to be able to exercise any influence on the course of this war. I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu would listen to anyone at this stage. I don't think Iranians are going to listen to anyone at this stage. It is really going to be up to the United States, Israel, and Iran to sort this out. But if this in some way has a horizontal expansion, sorry.
Sorry to intervene. The reason I asked you, Javed, about the Indian connection is quite simply this. India so far has not taken a strong public stand either way. There seems to be an element of neutrality, even though there's a sense that we have this strong relationship at the moment with the Israeli leadership.
Well,
is that how you, or do you believe that India can be an honest, can play this role as some kind of a neutral observer, honestly, or not? Can you be neutral in an Iran-Israel war?
I don't think we can. I was just saying that I don't think we either have the leverage here or in some way certain equities that will enable us to play the role of a mediator and tamp down this conflict. Not at all. If you say
not mediator, not mediator, Javed. Do we stay neutral? Do you believe that our best interests are in staying neutral?
Well, I mean, I think there are two issues. I was coming to that before you interrupted. One is that the whole principle of international law. I mean, without any doubt, you have to understand that what Israel has done, it may have done it in its national security interest, but that this is clearly a violation of sovereignty of another country. Now, Israel sees this as an existential threat. And it may have very good reasons. Of course, it has also had to deal with the proxies of Iran in its own neighborhood. and it was in a sense building up since October 7 to this denouement. But this is clearly a violation in some sense of the sovereignty of a country. And it started really with when US went into Afghanistan and then into Iraq. That whole principle has got demolished. You've seen Russia do that in Ukraine. So we actually have to be very cautious about not endorsing something of that nature. You know, we distance ourselves from the SCO statement, which unequivocally condemned this attack by Israel on Iran. That's a big statement to make. When we come out in the open and say we distance ourselves from that statement, that in itself is a very clear signal to Israel about
But
where
that
we
won't
stand.
go down. But that won't go down very well in Tehran. That isn't going
No,
down
it
very
doesn't
well
go
in
down
Tehran.
well in Tehran at all. But the point is that, you know, we've got this is the complexity of the situation. You've got a situation where you've got relations and stakes with Iran, and Iran, it's a near neighborhood. We have it's not just because of Iran and Chabahar. This is Central Asia. This is Afghanistan. This is Pakistan. All this is part of our immediate neighborhood. There are the maritime neighborhood that they are part of. We've had a long relationship with them, and I think there is no interest of India that is served in taking an unequivocal stand on behalf of Israel in this situation, notwithstanding the kind of a relationship that we've had. I mean, you've seen how countries are acting and as I've always said, foreign policy is basically a moral calculation of self-interest. You've just had a wonderful lunch meeting between the Pakistani army chief and President Trump, which is purely based on, I mean, completely free of any consideration of democratic values or liberal principles. It is based on calculation of immediate interest. So I think we have weighed it very carefully. We have sent a clear signal of where we stand on this issue. And from our point of view, frankly speaking, I mean, it just serves this prolonging of this war. It's either it's horizontal or vertical escalation has serious consequences for us, even if our energy dependency on the region has diminished. But we've got people there. We've got it's a near neighborhood. It's got market interests over there. So I think we'll play it very carefully. And I don't think Israel is certainly looking for us to come out so strongly on their behalf. They've gone ahead and done it. And as you've seen that almost everybody in the world has called for de-escalation and restraint. I mean, I think President Trump started on that note. We've got nothing to do with it. But then he also saw that Israelis had very high level of success immediately. And he's one of those who loves to jump onto the success bandwagon also.
Very quickly, therefore, in conclusion, you mentioned that very interesting that, you know, you believe diplomacy has always had an amoral character driven by self-interest. You mentioned General Munir's meeting yesterday with Donald Trump. Do you see Pakistan, which shares a large border with Iran, becoming a player if this conflict escalates? And should that be something we should be wary of? Is America possibly going to sort of keep an eye on what Pakistan does
Well,
or does not do?
Rajdeep, for a long time, Jandula has been operating out of Balochistan and against, this is a Sunni group which has been operating against Iran out of Pakistan. But I don't think, I mean, and you've also know the history of their old relationship where the centrifuge technology was exported by A.Q. Khan to Iran. But they will not get into this in any meaningful way. I think it would be absolutely suicidal and dangerous for Pakistan to provide any kind of material, military, covert support or overt support to the United States or Israel in this operation. At best, they will be staying neutral. They may provide some sort of intelligence, some sort of information that may be of help, but at least keep their borders secure and sealed from any Iranian efforts to move stuff onto this side of the border. But I don't think any active participation is going to serve any interest of Pakistan in this. I mean, they will have then Afghanistan, a hostile India, and a very hostile Iran. I mean, it's not a country that is going to collapse as a result of this war. So it's going to be playing it very carefully on this. And Pakistan, I have seen it over 10 years. They know exactly how to play more than a decade of dealing with the US through its most consequential phases, that they know how to deal with the United States and play them really well but tactically, strategically, they'll always overplay their cards, but tactically, they always gain something in the short run.
Javed Ashraf, for giving us that broad sweep of India's choices, of many of the regional stakeholders in what is becoming an escalating conflict. I appreciate you joining me here on the news today. Thanks very much.
Thank you.